Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The former unified champion Anthony Joshua is telling fans, don't listen to the BS unless it comes from him. So this refers to a story that from Gareth A. Davis from the Telegraph that said he was taking a £15 million step aside to allow Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk to fight. So he's come out in response to that news that has come out and put out a little statement which has been on IFL TV, and we'll get to some of the quotes. It's very brief, the clip itself, so there's only a few sentences of quotes to go through. But the problem is, he didn't dispel it. He says nothing's decided on that end, but he didn't say there was no truth in it in terms of it being an option, and he hasn't ruled it out. So if you listen carefully to what he said, and if you haven't seen that clip, go watch it in its entirety, obviously after this video, but I'll go through the quotes in a minute. But Joshua hasn't ruled out that step aside as an option. And the fact there's a couple of other things going on, and we'll get to it in the video, it does suggest to me that that is still a very live option. But to the interview itself, so you can see here, this is a screenshot from the IFL clip. Boxing Scene have transcribed it. It says, I'm hearing people say AJ accepts £15 million to step aside. I ain't signed no contract. I ain't seen no contract. So as it stands, stop listening to the BS until it comes from me. So we're going to wait for his BS, he says. So he continues, I'm the man in control of my destiny. I'm the man that handles my business. I'm a smart individual, and I make calculated decisions every step of the way. So saying that he hasn't signed a contract, he hasn't seen a contract, stop listening to the BS. But he has not ruled this out as an option of stepping aside. Doesn't mean to say that he won't see a contract. And the fact that that could be something that's going to be on the table has been alluded to by his own promoter, saying that Joshua has options in regards to his next fight. So see here on screen. So Eddie Hearn talking to Sky Sports. I'm meeting with AJ and 258 management to go through plans for his next fight. We have a number of proposals and options to discuss. Very careful language from Eddie Hearn, because he's not saying, and neither is Joshua, that it's just the rematch, that it's only the rematch and only the rematch next. So they're going to discuss options and proposals, and that would seemingly indicate that there's more options than just Alexander Usyk. Perhaps they will take some sort of step aside, have an interim fight, bed in his new trainer eventually when that's announced, and who knows when that will be. But Hearn continues, the goal remains the same, of course, to recapture the world heavyweight crown. So he's not saying that that has to be immediately next, though, is he? And then it goes on to quote Usyk's promoter Alexander Krasjuk of K2. We are in talks regarding Fury fight since November. And although AJ gave his consent, brackets according to the Telegraph, we still have not reached the final point in negotiations. And unless we get it, AJ rematch remains the basic option for us. So he's not exactly doing anything to sort of dispel talk that Fury and Usyk is something that's been actively pursued. And clearly it is. And even Anthony Joshua on a Snapchat, and here is a photo that he posted. So this is Prince Khalid. This is someone that he's obviously worked with before, that fight with Andy Ruiz Jr., the rematch, that was in Saudi Arabia. He was involved in that. So he's posted this, so he's obviously trying to get the lowdown of what's happening regarding these representations which have been happening on his behalf, and also for Fury and Usyk, for the people that are trying to, behind the scenes, not exactly clear who it is. It could be Daniel Kinahan, could be others involved, a sort of cabal of people trying to get an undisputed fight that have been maneuvering behind the scenes, trying to get a deal in place. And part of that deal from the Gareth A. Davis story would be £15 million for Joshua to step aside. So it's a little unclear what's going on, who's really involved. Bob Arum's previously said that him and Frank Warren haven't been part of this push for Undisputed, describing it as chaos and a mess and all this sort of stuff. Then you had the story, And interestingly, Joshua, who doesn't really respond to media type stuff in terms of stuff that's said about him, generally he stays quiet. You have the mouthpiece in Eddie Hearn who will say stuff on his behalf. Joshua's directly discussed this rumour of step aside, but he hasn't dispelled it completely. Just says he hasn't seen a contract, he hasn't signed a contract, and don't listen to the BS unless the BS is coming from him. Well, he didn't quite say it like that, but that's the way it came across. Maybe he'll have thought about saying that a little better, next time he goes to sort of say that. But effectively, he's saying, I'll tell you when there's some news. Don't necessarily listen to what is being put out there by others. But he didn't dispel the fact that step aside is a possibility. Hearn didn't dispel that either, just saying that there's a number of options to discuss with Joshua and his management. Krasjuk saying that a fight with Fury has been discussed as far back as November. They have been talking about it. So it is a live option from what I can tell. Joshua hasn't ruled it out completely. Neither has Hearn. And the fact is, maybe they are thinking that step aside could work, give him some time to bed in a new trainer, obviously a potential fight with the winner, and, who knows what could happen. The sort of machinations of boxing, things can change in a heartbeat. But Joshua, in coming out, hasn't exactly completely quelled the situation either. But maybe that's because he's been careful with his words, as is Eddie Hearn. Krasjuk was a bit more blunt, saying, yeah, there have been talks, we have been talking with Fury, there could be a deal, but it really depends on Joshua. So perhaps Gareth A. Davis was onto something, and Joshua's obviously been investigating some of what's been said, some of what's been happening, that phone call to the Middle East to try to find out what's going on. Maybe the money is going to be put up by the Saudis or someone else. But interesting times. Is Usyk Joshua next? But then again, is it going to be a case that a lot of smoke, no fire, maybe they can't get the funds together? Because at the end of the day, those involved that need to be stepping aside to allow an undisputed fight to happen, they're going to get paid. Joshua, £15 million, that's not chump change just to put out for a guy to sit on the sidelines. And considering there was no talk from the likes of Bob Arum to, cut anyone a check for Deontay Wilder to step aside, for example, to allow Undisputed to happen a while back. There was no money then. Now there's potentially more money to do that for Joshua. You just have to ask how viable this really is. But it's the heavyweight division. It does bring up some interesting sort of tales, and whether how much truth to this thing there is. I mean, clearly there's some efforts behind the scene, but can it get it over the line? I'd be leaning against it, but we'll see. But Joshua hasn't ruled it out, neither has Hearn. We'll just see where this goes. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.